This is the Cuban Missile Crisis podcast. I'm John Aguilera. The topic of today is going to be called Defend Texas, Episode 1. Welcome. And when I speak about Defend Texas, I don't mean it in a literal sense, in a sense of that we're going to pick up firearms and we have to defend Texas in a physical or armed conflict manner. What I mean is defend it at the ballot box. The last congressional election that we had here 2 years ago, and I'm going to use that as a reference point for today. And that's part of what I'm going to be touching about and what the podcast in general is about. It's about that defense of the ballot box. Because in today's two-tier justice system that we have, I really don't think that our side can just go somewhere, protest, and let their voices be heard. Our voices can only be heard at the ballot box. And here's why I say what I say. When our side protests, if two individuals get stupid and decide to break something, torch something, destroy some sort of private property, they're not going to be called by the media mostly peaceful protesters. They're going to be deemed domestic terrorists, insurrectionists, and all the lovely labels that they love to put up on us. So our defense has to be at the ballot box. I refer back to our last congressional election that we had, 34th District of Texas. It was Vicente Gonzalez and Mayra Flores. She lost by 12,000 votes, which right now this case escapes me the percentage margin that she lost for. 12,000 votes. Think about that for a second. If this message that I'm telling you, the information that I'm fixing to provide for you today is useful, please share with other people, like and subscribe. 12,000 votes where we left off at. We need more people to go out and vote. That's the only way we have a chance of picking up an extra congressional seat here in Texas and for the Congress at all. Why is that significant? Because if Democrats slash communists, that's also another introduction that I want to make you guys to. A lot of these people are not Democrats, they're communists, but that's a subject for another video. If they take over the House, the only laws and bills that are gonna come to the forefront is gonna be whatever their communist agenda is. Nothing that's important to us is gonna hit the floor if Hakeem Jeffries is the Speaker of the House. So that's where our defense has to be at the ballot box, not making a bunch of noise, not making a spectacle of ourselves. Is actually at the ballot box. And this takes me to a conversation that I was having with some coworkers, and this conversation centered around our way of life here in Texas, how we have it, how good we have it, and that's not up for debate. I think you have to be a communist or liberal, whatever you want to call them. I call them communists because I feel that's what they are. They're the only ones who have a problem with our state, but I think our state, it's there's no debating how good we have it here. And this conversation centered around that, and these individuals felt like some of the problems that we have in our state and some of the people pushing back against our way of life are people they think that it represents a small number of people here in Texas. They think it's an Austin problem. They think it's a bunch of crockpots in Austin that came from California, and they think it's concentrated in that area. And I have a very uncomfortable feeling that it's not as such as it may seem. That's not the case. That it's just a few crockpots in Austin creating problems and saying whatever they want to say. And reason why I say that, because many years ago, I'm going to put to you a date, and I want you to think about this date, and then we're going to get into this date in particular. And this date is November 8th, 1994. And you might be wondering what the hell happened November 8th, 1994. And it brings you to Proposition 187 that was passed in California. And according to Ballotopedia, which I'm going to read the overview from Ballotopedia, I'll drop a link in the description box so you can read it for yourself. But this is the overview of Proposition 187. And it's going to sound like something out of some fantasy novel because it just doesn't seem so feasible for that to happen today. And here we go. Proposition 187, excuse me, was designed to prohibit illegal immigrants residing in the country without legal permission in California from using public health care services except in cases of emergencies, social service, and public schools. Under the measure, no person could have received social services unless they have been verified by the as a United States citizen or were legally allowed to entry as a permanent or temporary resident. The measure would also require certain state and local agencies to report suspected residents in violation of immigration law to the California Attorney General and the United States Immigration and Naturalization Services, which is ICE now. Think about that for a second. November 8th, 1994. We're in May. We're 6 months from that being 30 years. And in 30 years, look how far left they moved. Think about this for a second. They could not use social services, public schools. So in social services, we're covering welfare, Medicaid, a bunch of public services they were not allowed to use in 1994. No Californian, no Republican holds statewide office in California. Let that sink in for a second. But November 8th, right? Let me read to you a little bit more. The day Proposition 187 was approved, several groups filed federal lawsuits against it, including the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. On November 11, 1994, Federal District Court Judge Matthew Byrne issued a temporary injunction against the state of California forbidding the enforcement of Proposition 187. Federal Judge Mariana Filzer then issued a permanent injunction. No, issued a permanent injunction pending trial. The state of California asked in 1997 that the case be dismissed and the injunction dropped on the grounds of federal immigration law had changed in the meantime. The federal court denied the request that the case be dismissed. The state of California did not appeal the decision, leaving permanent injunction standing. And the case did not proceed to trial. So the proposition passed November 8th. And November 11th, in 3 days, they filed lawsuits and they got it stopped. They got an injunction which prevented any enforcement of the proposition. It took them 3 days to do that. And that was back then. Let's fast forward to today. What's going on today in California? Remember that I mentioned that they couldn't use social services in California. Let's run till today. Today, they are able, illegal immigrants are able to qualify for Medi-Cal, which is the state-run healthcare system in California. They're eligible for that. I'm going to read to you a little bit about the expansion. The expansion is expected to cost the state of roughly $1.2 billion for the first 6 months before increasing to around $3.1 billion per year, according to estimates released last year. It will include undocumented immigrants between the ages of 26 and 49. the California Senate Republican caucus blasted Newsom, which is the governor of California, noting that more than 700 illegal immigrants are expected to be covered under the expansion and will certainly exacerbate the current provider access system, which they're already seeing long wait times. So 1.2 billion for the next 6 months. All this happened in a span of 30 years. Think about that. If some of the so-called crockpots that we deal with in Austin and some of this left-leaning thinking that is beginning to sprout from Austin, and I believe it's gonna spread to the rest of the state. Imagine how we're gonna look like 30 years from now. So that leads me to the core of this message. If we fall asleep at the wheel like California did. And they here it also says critics of the California Republicans attack Medi-Cal expansion as physically irresponsible, especially when the state is already facing $68 billion budget deficit. Think about that for a second. They're facing a $68 billion deficit. Here in Texas, we have a $16 billion surplus, which is like their bank account is in the negative, ours is on the plus. We're 68 we're beg your pardon, we're 16 billion in the plus, there's 68 billion in the negative. That's the insanity that they're pitching towards us. And we certainly do not want to become another California. And they also have the highest tax in the nation. They have a local state income tax of 13.3%. And if you make $44,000 a year in California, the state alone, your take home will be like 37 grand. Based on that specific number that you make, they, I believe, tax you around 6%, which you'll end up paying. That's not counting the federal tax. Your take home, that's not counting whatever the federal tax is going to tax you. Just from the state alone, you'll be taking home 37, roughly 37 and a half, plus whatever else the federal government is going to tax you. And I mentioned this to get to this. We pass here in Texas Proposition 4. Let me read to you the overview of Proposition 4. I will be dropping a link to this in the description box as well for Proposition 4. And let me read to you the overview. Excuse me, let me pop off all these ads. Texas Proposition 4 prohibits state income tax on individuals, Amendment 2019. And it voted yes. Obviously, it voted yes. It says a yes, and the yes was 1 million individuals who voted yes, and 500,000 voted no. I have no idea who in their right mind will vote no against that, but whatever. A yes vote supported adding an amendment to prohibit the state from levying income tax on individuals to the Texas Constitution, which requires a two-thirds legislative vote statewide referendum to amend, which is going to take a large majority of people to be amended or to be repealed in the state of Texas. I'm going to read to you the overview, and here is as follows. Proposition 4, the Texas Constitution is required the state legislature to put legislation enacting the income tax before voters as a statewide referendum, which voters could approve or reject. Placing referendum before voters requires simply majority vote of 50% plus one in each legislative chamber. Proposition 4 replaces the referendum requirement with a ban enacting the income tax on individuals. Since Proposition 4 ban on income tax added provision to the Texas Constitution, two-thirds of the vote in each legislative chamber and statewide referendum are needed to repeal and amend the ban. So this is no accident. The fact that we pass laws like this, like Proposition 4, is no accident. It's the way we vote, the way we think, the way we think. It's what enables us to pass legislation like this. But it doesn't mean this is a today thing. This is something that we need to do ourselves. We need to teach our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren to keep this up in Texas. If not, we have the dangers of becoming the disaster that California became 30 years later. And that's my point for today. Is for us to get politically active, and it's something that when what I'm asking out of everyone here is nothing insane. What I'm asking is something very simple. Election day is November 5th. We have in Texas early voting with damn near makes it like election month. All I'm asking is 30 minutes of your life to go vote and preserve the freedoms and the luxuries that we have in this state. That is all. If you want to think however you want to think, that's fine and dandy. But we must preserve the way of life that we have here for the sake of our kids and our grandkids. So, in conclusion, let's keep Texas, Texas. I would like to thank you for your time. If this message was helpful, please share, like, and subscribe. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.